anything else you'd like to add or say that maybe I didn't have the right question to ask?
I could talk about town government for a minute if you want, about the incident that happened that made me finally have enough, my breaking point. I had been out of work for 5 days on just a little mini vacation over 4th of July, worked from home a couple days and was out of town a couple days. Prior to 4th of July weekend on June 27th, there was an event down at the community center with Dennis Vosper and the current county recorder, Richard Garcia. They did a voter registration drive. Actually, Richard Garcia did a voter registration drive. And Dennis showed up down there to support him. I showed up down there to kind of help with the community center, support him. A couple of other candidates showed up. Mike Roth came down to, help and support. William Ponce even showed up down there for a minute. At the same time, the census committee decided that they were going to ride along with that and set a table up and try to get census filled out at the same time. 2 council members are on that committee. So they showed up at the community center. They wanted to nitpick things, wanted to look in my office, and I guess complain about storage that was in my office. So the following weekend was 4th of July. Shortly after that, the day I came back, July 9th, I came back to work. And at 7 o'clock in the morning, and at 7:05, Cliff O'Neill, the assistant town manager and my direct supervisor, walks into the community center and says, excuse the language, but this was his words. He goes, "What the hell happened in here over the weekend?" I was like, "Excuse me, good morning." And he said, "Like I said, what happened in here over the weekend?" And I said, "Like I said, good morning." And he said, yeah. He said, "Over the weekend, you rented the building out." I said, "No, it was 4th of July weekend." I looked at my coworker and she's like, "No." I said, "Cliff, we didn't rent the building out." He said, "Okay, the weekend before." So I said, "Well, are you talking about that specific event that happened with the voter registration?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, well, that was June 27th. What about it?" "Well, there was 2 council members down here and they said the place was an absolute mess and you're not keeping up with the building and, whatnot." And I said, "Well, I know you won't tell me the council members, but I know exactly which 2 were there, Linda Goldberg and Carrie Amon. And Linda Goldberg has it out with me and wants to nitpick everything I do. Her and I got into it because she wanted me to unlock my office and I refused to unlock my office. I wasn't on the clock. I was down there as a volunteer to help with basically the voter registration drive, but offered to help decorate their tables with my decorations, anything that they needed, water and whatnot." So I told her, "I'm not on the clock. You don't need to see my office." And she kept insisting she needed to see my office, that the office needed to be organized and cleaned. So I explained to her that as council, they decided that they wanted to cancel the storage unit and the stuff that was in the storage unit had to go somewhere. So it ended up in my office and it stacked up in there. And she, proceeded to have issues with that. Well, that's what she went back and called the town manager and told Jim Ferguson that the community center is a mess and whatever, and it had to pertain to that office. So Cliff got mad. He said, "Well, I already know what the issue with your office is, but this is getting petty." And I said, "It is petty. They're not my boss." Cliff goes, "No, they're not your boss. They need to stay out of it." I've been attacked by council members numerous times about my job, so whatever. Nothing gets done. So Cliff says, "Well, finish up what you're doing down here. Meet me up in my office. We need to do your annual review." It was due on July 1st. I said, "All right." So I go up there and he pulled up my previous review because he was not my direct supervisor last year. The town clerk was my direct supervisor for 3 years. So he pulls up my file, gets my previous review. There's 3 places they can judge you: department standard, below department standard, and above department standard. On every category, I've always, every year, gotten above department standard. When it came to attendance and dependability, he marked me down to just regular department standard. So I questioned it. I said, "I've worked 12-hour shifts to cover my coworker that just doesn't show up or has issues. I've worked 7 days in a row. I've taken comp time instead of overtime." And I was like, "I'm always here. I never call in. I had surgery done. I had planned that out and banked up sick time and gave enough notice." I said, "So what's the issue with my attendance and dependability?" And he said, "We'll get to that in a minute." So then he gets to leadership and again marked me down from above to department standard, which isn't below, but it's still a markdown for me, And I said, "Well, again, I questioned it. I said, why am I getting marked down on that?" You know, I run every town event. I organize every town event. I have employees under me. I do, you know, the scheduling of all the classes and everything that happened down here in the community center. I said, why is my leadership getting marked down? He said, again, we'll talk about that in a minute. I said, okay. So he starts writing stuff down about me mixing work with personal on Facebook. And that's why he marked me down on attendance and dependability and leadership. And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, a post you made on Facebook. And I'm like, trying to think what I say now, you know? And it was a post that Dennis Vosper had made regarding a video movie that someone was making about the corruption that happened in Quartzite several years ago with previous police chief Jeff Gilbert. And another, at the time, friend of ours, Sam Saxton, had made a comment. And so I had commented back to Sam that he wasn't about it being false and slander and whatnot. I said, Sam, you weren't there during that time. I was there. This is what happened. These are facts. This is, you know, the movie is what it is. My comment was, there were corrupt things that went on in Quartzite. There still are things that are corrupt within this town. I said, I can tell you of things, but it is a better place to live than it was 10 years ago. I never mentioned work. I never said within town hall. I never said, you know, anything, just in the town as a whole. So I'm racking my brain. Well, like I said, when I want to stir the pot or I'm mad at them, I mention Mike Roth. The comment really had nothing to do with Mike, even though he was mentioned in the video. So I said, oh, are you talking about a comment I made to Sam Saxton about Mike Roth? He came unglued, threw the paper at me. I said, I don't need to read that. I know what I wrote. He had screenshotted what I wrote and printed it. I said, I know what I wrote. You know, it says nothing about the town. He got very offended. This is Cliff O'Neill, the assistant town manager. Very offended, very defensive, said that if I'm going to bring something up that happened 10 years ago, I'm bringing him into it. And I said, how am I bringing you into it? You've only worked here for the last year. And he said, well, I worked here 20 years ago as interim town manager. And I said, that was 20 years ago. I wasn't here. We're talking about 10 years ago, you know? And I said, it's definitely better than it was 20 years ago, but I just said it's better than it was 10. And he just told me, don't go digging into that deeper, leave the past in the past. And so then it got me thinking, well, what happened 20 years ago? What doesn't he want me to dig up? He's like insisting I leave the past in the past. We're still in my annual review. He brings up, he never gave me specific reasons on my attendance and my leadership or anything like that. He just basically said it had to do with mixing work and personal Facebooks together, which had nothing to do with that. So I was like, whatever. So he blew up, started going on and on about Mike Roth. And he goes, you know, it's people like Mike Roth that want to play the harassment card, and he's running for an office, and this is the card he's going to play. Poor, pitiful me. The town's harassing me. He goes, I'll have you know, he's been on our list because of his property. We have served him with papers to clean up his property. So he's going to play that card, which for the record, he has not. So, you know, I asked Cliff, I said, hey, why are we talking about Mike Roth during my annual review? This has nothing to do with my review. And the type of person Mike Roth is, or if he's going to play this card or not, this has nothing to do with it. Evidently, I hit a nerve. And he goes, well, we're going to talk about all this later with Jim Ferguson, the town manager. I said, okay, sign the review. They said I wasn't getting a raise, that there was a freeze on funding right now with COVID. They're not sure where budget's going and whatever. So I wasn't getting that raise. The papers didn't reflect it. I asked for a copy of the papers. He said they'll be in your file. That was that. I knew I was being called down later that afternoon. And I was like, well, depending on how it goes this afternoon, I may be giving notice. So about 1:30 that afternoon, I got the call to go down to town hall. I was supposed to meet with Cliff O'Neill, the assistant town manager, Jim Ferguson, the town manager, and Kiki Tennell, which is the finance manager / HR representative. So she's always in there. So we get in there. Jim isn't there. Jim conveniently got called somewhere else and could not be at that meeting, or I know it would have gone even worse than it did. So it was just Cliff O'Neill, myself, and Kiki Tennell in there. At the same time, we have to backstep again, at the same time of the voter registration, I was supporting Sam Saxton for town council at the time. I did have a vinyl sticker on the back of my window that said Sam Saxton for town council. A certain council member, again, Linda Goldberg, got offended that I had the support, that I was supporting a council candidate. brought it up to the town manager. They made a big old stink about it. Went as far as following me to sending me an email to have it taken off my car. I picked my kids up for dinner after work. We went straight to Silly Owls for dinner. They knew I was at Silly Owls and still had the vinyl on my car. Said a council member told them the vinyl is still on my car. And I said, yeah, I'm taking my kids to dinner and then I'll take it off my car. They're texting me while I'm at dinner. The next morning, I'm getting emails from the town manager on a Friday when none of us are on the clock. I'm getting emails from the town manager asking me when I'm going to take the vinyl off my car. So I sent pictures that it's already off my car. But he had pictures from the night before at the restaurant from a council member that the vinyl was still on my car. Going into that meeting on July 9th at 1:30, Cliff wanted to talk about that post that the comment I had made on that post is what I was getting written up for. He gets out of the form, starts filling it out, and he said, this is just your first verbal warning. I said, you're writing it. Looks like a written warning to me. And he says, no, this is just formality. It's a verbal warning. I said, no, verbal means we're talking. You're writing and you want to sign it. You want me to sign it. This is a written warning. Says, this is my second incident. And I said, my second? What was my first? And evidently I was bashing the police department. The lieutenant had concerns about my Facebook use because I had told someone on a Facebook comment that if they had an issue with an accident, they should call the police department and ask for a copy of their police report. That was my exact wording. It would be no different if they would have called town hall and asked me over the phone. But evidently he took that as bashing the police department, and he has concerns of my Facebook use. So that was the first incident. And I was like, okay. So he proceeds to write that I'm mixing work Facebook with personal Facebook. I said, how? And he slides that paper across the table and I slid it back. I said, again, I know what I wrote. I don't need to see that. I said, but I didn't mix work and personal. Nowhere in there does it say corruption within town hall, corruption in my workplace, corruption with my coworkers. It just says in Quartzite in general. And he says, well, council members have read that and they perceived it as being, again, Linda Goldberg, because she had commented on that same post, had perceived it as me being a town employee, and I'm talking about the town. Not my problem how someone conceives or perceives something. So he went on about that, about perception, and I kept arguing, well, not my problem. If they want to perceive it that way, not my problem. That's just, it's not what I said. They said, well, you represent the town. Nope, I don't represent the town. I was like, council, the mayor, town manager, maybe the assistant town manager. I don't represent the town. I'm an employee. And I said, maybe stretching it, I represent the recreation department or the community center Monday through Thursday from 7 to 6. Otherwise, you can affiliate me with the town, but I don't represent the town. He didn't like that answer, kept going on about the perception, and I kept insisting, show me in there where it says I'm talking about work. He couldn't write me up for it. So he says, okay, well, after reading this comment, I decided to go to your Facebook, Sam Saxon's Facebook, and Dennis Vosper's Facebook. I said, okay, what'd you find? That you support Sam Saxon for council. No, I don't support Sam Saxon for council. And he goes, well, there's pictures on your Facebook of when you stick the vinyl on your car and stuff. And I said, that's not on there. I pointed to Kiki and I said, she told me I had to take it all off of my car. So it's off my car. It was off that night. I said, she told me I had to do it. So I did it. So tell me what else you found on my Facebook. He says, okay. Well, I saw you went to the town's Facebook page and you shared stuff from the town's Facebook page onto your personal Facebook page. I said, flyers for my 4th of July event, flyers for my 3 meals for the kids program, flyers for the summer program, it is petty. I was like, so I took flyers for town events that you wanted us to promote, and every other employee shared them onto their Facebook pages. I didn't make comments about them. I didn't say anything. I purposely shared them so they would have the town logo on them, and you're writing me up for that. Kiki Tennell said, technically, that is mixing work Facebook with personal Facebook, because I took it from a work Facebook page and put it on my personal Facebook page. And that's what I got written up for. And so I grabbed the form. At this point, I'm done. I just said, all right, I'm done. Give me the form. Let me sign it. did sign it under duress, wrote that under my signature, slid it back across the table, and I said, I have a question for her, and pointed to Kiki. And I said, if an employee were to give notice of resignation, how would you handle their vacation pay? Are you going to pay them out? Do they need to take it? And she goes, what do you mean? I said, the question was very clear. Please answer it. So she answered my question, and I said, all right, my last day of work will be August 28th. And her jaw kind of hit the floor, and Cliff kind of looked dumbfounded, and they're both like, what? So I was very clear. I will email you notice as soon as I get back to my office. And I did. I did fulfill the 6 weeks. At first, I wasn't going to. Before I left and I slid the paper back to Cliff, he had made the comment again about something came up with the employee handbook. I think it was about supporting Sam Saxton for council. And I said, I read that employee handbook. And he had mentioned who had issues with me. Lieutenant Gray had concerns with my Facebook use, and Council Member Linda Goldberg had issues with my Facebook use. He made that very clear. Cliff O'Neill made that very clear that those are the two that had major issues with me. And I said, oh, that makes sense. At this point, I had already given notice and was mad. And he goes, well, how does that make sense? And I said, well, both of those people have a personal vendetta against me. Both of those people are very strong Ponce supporters, and I do not support Ponce for sheriff. And he says, what do you mean you don't support Ponce for sheriff? And this is in town hall. And I said exactly what I said. I do not support Ponce for sheriff. I mean, how much clearer do you want me to get? He says, well, why not? And I said, I don't have to give you my reasons. And like I said, I read that employee handbook. You cannot bully me, coerce me, harass me into giving you my reasons why, into supporting my coworker, anything of the sort. Kiki looked at him and goes, no, you can't, let her go. And he goes, no, I want to know, if you don't support Ponce, who do you support? I said, again, it's my constitutional right. I don't have to tell you, but since you asked, I'll tell you because I have no shame. I support Michael Roth for sheriff. And he turned bright red, flew halfway across the table, was yelling and screaming, why would you support someone like him? And, going on about Mike. And I just stood up and I said, August 28th is my last day. I'll email you when I get back to my office. Before you leave, he goes, October 20 or August 28th is your last day. He goes, August 30th, you're not going to go and get on Facebook and blast the town on stuff, are you? I said, what are you afraid of me saying? And he goes, like I said, you're not going to go blast anything, are you? I go, and like I said, what are you afraid of me saying? I walked out, gave them my notice, gave them 6 weeks notice. The days following that, Finch harassed me greatly. Finch would drive by all the time. He would see me, he would flip his lights on. This went on for about 2 weeks after I gave notice at work. My kids and I, that was on a Thursday. And then the following Wednesday, my daughter and I was going up, both my daughters were going up to Parker. We had came out of right by the grub stake, right there on Canoia where I live. I had pulled out right there. And by the time I had hit the fire department, the black and white pickup truck police vehicle that we have came flying up on my tail, followed me literally all the way to 12 Mile Junction. I turned left to go to Parker, was still right on my tail. I was like so nervous and trying to follow the speed limit and figuring out why I couldn't make out who was in. I kept looking at my rearview mirror, couldn't make out who it was. Driving, got all the way to the sign right after 12 Mile Junction, right before you get to the County Public Works that says you're now entering Colorado River Indian Tribes. At that point, the officer turned around and flew back towards Quartzite. No idea who it was, no idea why they were on my butt other than to intimidate. No clue who was driving that vehicle. Tried to ask Ponce about it. I did text Ponce trying to ask him, hey, what officer was driving that truck? I just kind of got LOL, why do you want to know? Because they followed me to the Crit Reservation line. It was kind of nerve-wracking. I'd like to know what officer was on duty at this time yesterday, wouldn't give me an answer on who was driving that vehicle. So I did go back to Cliff O'Neill, my direct supervisor, tell him about the incident. He says, oh, it was probably just coincidence. They probably got called back into town. Why were they headed to Parker anyway? Why are they wet on my butt? They could have passed me or put their lights on for me to pull over if it was an emergency. They weren't transporting because, like I said, it's the pickup truck. That same day, we were coming back from Parker. I needed a phone number that I had left on my desk at work. I had just turned on Chandler Street at Best Auto, going to the community center, and an officer, I could see the vehicle that Finch drives, the silver Dodge Charger, coming towards the stop sign as I'm turning it. Before he reaches a stop sign, flips his lights on, and I go to kind of pull to the side or whatever, he turns his lights off. And he stayed at the stop sign until he saw me get to the community center, flipped his lights on again, flipped them off, and then turned right. So I mentioned that incident to my boyfriend, my kids, whatever, my coworker. They all think I'm crazy. And Finch did that one more time. I had to give my coworker a ride home a few days later. And I'm pulling out, same thing at Chandler at Best Auto. I pull into the turn lane. I see him coming towards me, flips his lights on again, never pulls me over, never gets behind me. I said, there, did you see it? Because he did it that time. And so that time she saw it too. I made those complaints up to town hall. So it's just little harassment like that. And when I go to question it, the text would get ignored, or I just get laughing emojis or LOLs back from the police chief. About 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, there's no more talk of Mike Roth. Cliff would bring it up to me a few times. There was a time in that 2 week period, Mike had wanted to rent the community center for a Meet the Candidates campaign. Him and somebody else had been asking about renting. They didn't call me at the community center. They called town hall to get the information. They relayed the information back. It got forwarded to me. So I asked, do we rent the community center out? Do we not? Cliff said, no, at this time, we're not going to rent to anyone. And I asked Cliff, I said, well, would you like me to call Mr. Roth and let him know that at this time, this is our COVID procedures. We're not renting the building out. And he goes, oh, no, I'll call Mr. Roth. He goes, I'm looking forward to having a talk with him.